Hello, welcome. I'm Megan Muty. I'm the Director of Family Matters Parent Training and Information Center. We are one of two federally funded parent centers in the state of Illinois, and we cover the 94 counties outside of the Chicago Metro Center. And if you're in need of services in the Chicago Metro Center, we would reference Family Resource Center on Disabilities, or FRCD. They can help you navigate special education services up there. We are thrilled today on our podcast to welcome Ann Oswalt. Ann is a board member of Family Matters and a great partner and collaborator. She's the Regional Council Manager for Region 12, Birth to 5 Illinois. And we are thrilled to have her talk about early childhood services, her experiences, her guidance that families might benefit from today. We do want to remind you that Family Matters is not a legal services agency, and we cannot and do not offer any legal advice. This podcast will be shared on our website in just a few days, so we encourage you to share it out. Listen again if you don't get to hear the whole thing today. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Ann and have her tell you a little bit about herself.
Thank you, Megan. I am so excited to be here. Like you said, I am the Regional Council Manager for Region 12 with Birth to 5 Illinois. I cover Clay, Crawford, Lawrence, Jasper, and Richland counties, but there are Birth to 5 Illinois offices all throughout the state. So if you're not in my region, you're in somebody else's. I have really enjoyed being a board member with Family Matters. I have learned so much. I have worked in and around early childhood for over 30 years. And most importantly, I'm a mom. That's my favorite part of it.
One of the things I love most about all services related to school and disabilities is that so many people working in it are parents to folks with
Mhm.
disabilities. That's just how
Yeah.
it goes. So, well, let me ask you this, the most basic. A lot of the listeners to our podcast are families, obviously. So one of the great starting points, I think, would be, you're a parent of a young child where you're starting to have some concerns, notice what you think might be some delays in development, and you're not sure where to go or what to do. What kind of guidance can you give a family related to that?
Yeah. So if you have a young child and you suspect there's a delay, the absolute very first thing I want you to do is to know that you are not alone. I think that families need to hear that a lot. There are lots of people who can help. It can be really scary when you have a concern. It can, bring up a lot of emotions, but you are absolutely not alone. The first place you should probably start is your healthcare provider. So if you have like a family doctor, a pediatrician, a nurse practitioner, if you receive WIC services, that's the first place to start. Those are the people to talk to look at how your child is developing, make sure there's not some sort of, physical issue that, if your child was walking and now isn't walking, let's make sure that their foot doesn't hurt or, something like that. Kind of as a side note, if it is possible for you to have a family, or I'm sorry, a healthcare home, a medical home, that is really important. So if you have one practitioner or one practice that is seeing your child on a consistent, continual basis, that really helps your provider to notice patterns, to see any changes. So the more familiar they are with your child, the better they're going to be able to assess whether or not your child is developing the way that is typical for them. Um, so go to your doctor, go to your nurse practitioner, go to WIC, talk to them. Typically from there, they'll do a screening or they'll do a referral. If for some reason they don't, if your child is under the age of 3, you can call Child and Family Connections, also known as early intervention, and they are all throughout the state also. Mine personally is CFC 20, so Child and Family Connections 20, but you can find yours just by going online to providerconnections.org. And there you can just pop in where you live, your zip code, your town, whatever, and it'll pull up the information for you to contact for them. They will then go in and arrange for some paperwork. There's always paperwork, and they'll talk to the family, and then they can send in professionals who will do some assessments, do some screenings, some evaluations, and then everybody gets together and talks about it, and they go from there. The family is completely involved in that process. Um, and then if your child is over the age of 3, they kind of age out of that early intervention, system. But if your child is 3 or older, you can contact your school district, either their special education department or even the elementary school, and they're going to tell you where to go from there. And again, family is involved, and there'll be some screenings and some conversation and some paperwork, but they'll all work together. A lot of times EI and the district work with your healthcare provider to make sure that everybody's on the same page and you and your child are getting the services they need.
Thank you, Ann. I think a couple things about getting services for that kind of birth to 5 age range in Illinois is there's so many different organizations that sit in that space. Like, we're very lucky in Illinois that there's so many resources. And as a parent myself, I always look back on those early years, and I think really EI providers are the master of family engagement. Like, they know how to engage families, keep families at the table, use family voice. And so you'll have a really family-centered experience in early intervention services. So I'm thrilled to hear you sort of remind families that this is your process, you're involved, you're part of every step.
Yes.
Can you talk a little bit about your organization, Birth to 5, and how families experience your organization and what your mission is, just overall?
Of course. So Birth to 5 Illinois is an organization that is looking at early childhood education and care at the regional level. We've divided the state into 39 regions. Like I said, I'm region 12. I have my 5 counties, but there are 38 other regions throughout the state. And we are looking at early care and education at that regional level. We keep track of kind of what's going on with everybody else, but for the most part, I just look at my 5 counties. And we listen. I think the most important thing we do is we listen, and we listen to families. Families have such diverse stories, and providers have stories, and our community has stories. Excuse me. So we listen to those stories, and we listen to what's working with childcare and all of that whole system. What is not working? What can we do locally? How do we locally meet the needs of families and children? And then we have councils. So each region has a family council, and that is made up of all kinds of families. We don't define what a family looks like, right? Each family defines their own makeup. So we have kind of your typical, mom and dad and 2.5 kids with the white picket fence, but we also have grandparents raising grandchildren, and we have families of children that have disabilities or delays, and we have foster families, and we run the gamut. If you have a young child, we want you on our family council. And then we have an action council, and our action council has typically 2 family representatives. So even on our action council, families are represented. And we have childcare providers, teachers, community members, or business owners, faith leaders, healthcare providers, mental health care providers. Pretty much anybody who wants to be a part of this can be on our action council. And so we're taking these councils, and we've created a regional needs assessment for each of our regions. We've created recommendations, and then action plans. So we're taking these recommendations, and we are mobilizing our local entities to make these changes. So that's really exciting. Instead of talking about what's wrong, we're trying to do something about it, and we're trying to do it at the local level, because this is our community. These are our families. These are our neighbors. We are centered around equity, and we work to make sure that families, no matter what they look like, no matter where they live, we make sure that their voices are heard. And so we take all of that and we pour it into early childhood education and care and supporting families.
So I think if those of you listening, this will be maybe your first exposure to what Birth to 5 does around family councils and advisory council. They really do some progressive work that really focuses on family engagement in a way that we'd love to see carried over into other systems of care. So thank you for sharing that, because I think for families, that's so empowering just to know that kind of work is being done out there consistently, and that there's something they can engage in if they have young kiddos. Could you talk a little bit? Because one of the things for families who are new to the system, or maybe families who haven't had any exposure, but sometimes hear all of the discussions around engaging early, why we care so much about early intervention, why birth to 5 is so important.
Um, Early intervention matters so, so much, and for a lot of different reasons. We have heard over and over and over again, talking to, our communities, we've heard how EI has changed their lives, changed the lives of their children. It is so powerful. We used to think that kids are resilient and we'll just give them time and they'll catch up. We know that's not necessarily true now. Um, we know that a child's brain is 80% of the size of their adult brain by 3 years old and 90% by 5 years old. That's a whole lot of brain growth in those few years. We know that children's brains form more than 1 million connections, more than 1 million neural connections every second. And we talk a lot about windows of opportunity. And the brain is an amazing thing and it can continue learning throughout your lifespan, but there are these windows of opportunity where the brain learns things better, things like language and motor skills. And so if we support this growth and development through these windows of opportunity, we're going to have better outcomes. Um, so that it's vital that we have this early intervention. Um, the most beautiful thing I think about EI is that it happens in the child's own environment. It's typically in their house. It could be in their childcare. It could be at a relative's house. It could be at the library, somewhere where the child and the family is comfortable. I think we all know, even as adults, we learn better when we're comfortable, right? If you walk into a big auditorium and it's a little overwhelming, you might not hear what that trainer has to say if you're doing a training. But if you're sitting on your recliner watching a webinar, sometimes you can take it in a little bit better. Same as with children. When they're comfortable, they're going to learn better. Early intervention is a whole lot of things. It's speech therapy, physical therapy, occupational therapy, developmental therapy, behavioral health therapy. And the parents and caregivers work with the therapist. So it's not that this child is getting these therapies an hour a week when the therapist is there. It's that they're getting it continuously 24/7 from their families. And that is the difference, I think, because it's so much more natural when it's just part of your parenting. Families are engaged in the work, just like you said, that family engagement is so, so important. And then the other thing, and of course, children and families and that outcome is the absolute most important thing about early intervention. But sometimes we need to think a little bit outside of that, and we need to see the financial incentive for communities to really support early intervention. It's estimated that for every dollar that is spent on early intervention, $7 is saved in special education and long-term social service support needs. So saving $7 for every dollar, like, that's a really good return on your investment. And so, not to monetize, child development, but when we're looking at things like this, so not only is it so helpful to our children, we're looking long term at workforce. If you're supporting these children and you are helping them to reach goals and to, get as much out of their development as they can, that's going to make for a stronger workforce even. So it's huge. And
I
it's
so
lifelong.
appreciate that connection, because I don't feel like we make that connection enough. And we see it as like the right thing to do, which it is, or as an important sort of healthcare support, and it is.
Yeah.
But that issue of it's good policy and it's financially responsible to do those things. And I don't think we always think of that. So thank you for sharing that.
It's weird to think about money, when you're talking
Right.
about this, but
It's part
that's
of the
the
discussion.
reality of it sometimes.
Right. Now, I wonder, for somebody who's worked in early childhood for a long time, really has a good sense of the system, what do you think Illinois does really well in early childhood?
Illinois is doing a lot really well in early childhood. So that is exciting to me. I've worked my whole career in Illinois, and so I've been kind of along to see the changes. So it's been kind of fun. Um, like we've talked about, Illinois is really focusing on families' lived experiences. There's that old saying that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And so let's ask families what they need because they can tell us what they need. Um, and so many families in our community and in communities around the state had said that they didn't think anyone was listening. They didn't think anyone cared. And it's so validating to them that somebody's asking and listening. You can actually, Birth to Five Illinois has been collecting stories. So you actually can go onto our website, a little plug, it's birth5il.com. So birthtofiveil.com, birth25il.com. And you can read these stories, but you can families can enter their own stories. So you can tippity type your, story into there. If you need help, you can reach out to your local Birth to Five Illinois office and we can support you in that. And all that's on that website too. And you can put your name and your face and all of that, or you can be completely anonymous, like wherever your comfort level lies. We have people who are totally out there, people are completely anonymous, and then all levels in between. So, go on there, read those stories, share your story, because that's how we learn. That's how we as Birth to Five Illinois learn, but that's how we as a state learn what families need. Illinois is also really encouraging the use of infant and early childhood mental health consultants, which is a relatively new thing. Thinking about a baby and mental health isn't something that we've done before. It's relatively new, but we're really looking at that because we know that what we need to better understand children's, behavior and mental health, but we also have to understand the impact of things like implicit bias and how that plays a role sometimes. We have to understand learning environment and how to make sure that the learning environment is conducive to children. And, you can have the most beautiful classroom, but if it's, or center, if it's not meeting the needs of the children, then it doesn't really matter. So, I think most importantly, we have super dedicated providers. They're so knowledgeable, they're so dedicated, and they really are providing these safe and nurturing places for children. They're providing developmentally, culturally, linguistically appropriate environments that are engaging and they're welcoming. They provide referrals, not just if you have a child that has a suspected delay, but if you need food, if you need housing, if you need domestic violence services, those are the kinds of referrals that are going out. We have heard over and over and over again how childcare and teachers are the backbone. They allow families to work. They allow families to go to school. They're not just babysitters, right? They're lifelines to a lot of families. They allow families to be successful. And I think that is our biggest asset, is our providers.
I appreciate you saying that because I think we think often of early childhood preschools, early childhood programming.
Yeah.
But we don't think about the fact that for a lot of families is going to be one of the very first interactions they have with the broader social sort of network.
Yes.
Of if they need social services, if they need crisis intervention, that often stems from that initial connection. And that's honestly one of the foundations of why that system is so helpful to families. So
yes,
thank you.
yes.
Before we lose you today, are there any resources or specific agencies or processes or just guidance that you would want to give to families who are new to the system or about to seek services?
Like I said in the beginning, it can be really scary, but no, you're not alone. That is first and foremost, that is what I want people to remember, that there are people who will fight for you. There's Family Matters that will that will help you. Navigating the whole system, the whole special education system, especially, can be very confusing. So it's so important that we have like Family Matters that can help families navigate that, because it really can be scary. And the law is not, it's written by lawyers, and most of us are not lawyers. Most of us are not judges. And so it's hard for people sometimes to understand, especially when you are still trying to process the fact that your child may have a delay or a disability. That's a lot to process. It's a lot to do on your own. And so reach out. I wish more kids were getting these EI referrals. I wish we were getting away from the kind of give it time thought process. Um, but that takes learning. A lot of our regions, in our regional needs assessments, in our recommendations, have plans in place to get the information out there to families and to providers. We don't have a lot of special education coursework. If you're going to be a regular education teacher, there's not a whole lot. So how do we support the people who are doing the work, right? How do we make sure that they are getting continuing education? How do we make sure that families are getting that same training, and that there's a consistency? So what you are doing with your child is the same as what's happening at childcare or what's happening at preschool, so that your child has that consistency and isn't trying to meet the needs of different places that are confusing, and you don't really kind of know what to do where. That's hard as a grown up. It's really hard when you're two.
Yes, and parents are the one consistent provider through all of those systems. And so, kind of coming back to why you all support family engagement at such a high level and so intensive because of that. So this has been so helpful. I will tell all the listeners, Ann came to one of our staff meetings and we had her with us at the table for a long time. And that's what sparked us wanting to have her come do a podcast, because she speaks about early childhood with such passion and interest that you cannot help but be very interested in it. So I really appreciate it, Ann. Thank you for taking the time out of your day to join us. And if you all have questions and want to reach out to Ann, we'll include her contact information when we post. But thank you so much for taking the time to listen today.
Thank you. And kind of the final thing I want to put out there is, that kind of old tried and true tagline that families are their children's first and most influential teachers and deserve to be respected as experts on their own children is absolutely true. Trust your gut, reach out for help. We're here to help.
Thank you, Ann.
Thank you so much.